My dad invited the family to his house. The oil boom had busted and businesses were going out left and right. We had, I think at that time, maybe 12 stores. He invited us to his house, sat us down in his living room, and basically told us he didn't know how we would survive. 1986 wound up being double the most profitable year, almost double the most profitable year that we had ever had. Were it not for God, we easily would not be here.
Hello, and welcome to the Liberty Spenders podcast. We are Kurt and Kristen Luidhardt, your hosts and co-founders of the Prosper Group, an agency that's raised over $500 million and helped elect over 100 members of Congress, 14 governors, 15 U.S. senators, and 1 president. And now, in addition to helping political candidates get elected, we're helping your business get elected by answering the question, what would happen if you could tap into a unique and engaged audience we call Liberty Spenders? And Liberty Spenders are politically conservative or faith-based consumers, and they're looking to buy from businesses and brands that align with their values.
Our guest today is Steve Green, the president of Hobby Lobby Stores and the chairman of the board for the Museum of the Bible. Steve became president of Hobby Lobby back in 2004 and has helped grow their family business to more than 1,000 stores in 48 states, employing over 45,000 people company-wide, with $7.5 billion in annual sales in 2023.
Life goals.
Yeah, exactly. And Hobby Lobby started back in 1972, and they're now the largest privately owned arts and crafts retailer in the world. Their headquarters in Oklahoma City. I also know Steve as the founder of the Museum of the Bible. In 2009, the Green family purchased its first biblical artifact and has since acquired tens of thousands of items, which now compose the Green collection, is on loan there at the Museum of the Bible, which opened in 2017, just a few blocks from the Capitol. He's also authored 4 books, 2 of which we have here. But most importantly, Steve and his wife, Jackie, have been married 39 years.
Woo.
Was it 39 years this year in 2024?
No, next month it'll be 40.
Hey.
So we're almost at 40.
Oh, wow.
Well, yeah. I now have to, we are 20 years married on August 28th. So maybe it's.
Okay. Ours is the 25th.
Yes.
So.
Wonderful. Oh, that's quite an accomplishment. We could probably do an episode on that.
Yeah.
But I'm also just really excited to talk about Hobby Lobby. You know, one of the things that struck me as I was reading about it was, I've heard statistics, and I was trying to look this up before the show, and they range anywhere from 65% to 95% of all small businesses are gone in the first 10 years. And Hobby Lobby's been going strong since 1972, which is actually longer than I've been alive. And very few get to $7.5 billion. I thought we'd start with, why do you think Hobby Lobby has stayed around when so many businesses struggle over time?
Yeah, I've heard similar statistics. The one I use often is just 90% of anything, whether it be a church, a business, ministry, restaurant. Long-term success is a challenge. So many will start things, but very few actually are able to get to the level that we have, and we have been blessed. And I would start by saying Dad is, who started this and got it going and is still involved today, is just really skilled at retail. He was in the retail business before he started Hobby Lobby, working at a general merchandise company called TGNY, and was very successful there. Became one of the youngest store managers, became a supervisor. So he just has a knack for retail. He's a organized individual, likes being orderly. He's a hard worker. And it's been said in retail, it's not as much education as it is application. And as a hard worker, and just this drive for excellence, it served him well. And as he would say, he just feels that he is anointed. So bottom line, it would be God has blessed him with the skill set. He has blessed the business, our family. And we know that were it not for his blessings and his guidance and direction and protection and being there even through our mistakes, that we wouldn't be here. And so we give God a lot of the credit, give him all the credit.
Yeah, well, it is one of those places where I feel like I can roam around the store
Yes.
for a while,
You're
even
transported.
and even if I don't have something specifically I'm looking for, I end up walking out with more than what I decided to come in for.
Yeah.
So there's something about doing retail and merchandising right, that I'm sure you guys have mastered over more than 40 years, almost 50, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I thought perhaps you might think of a time, maybe there was a moment, when Hobby Lobby was young, or maybe even later on in its growth, that was a real inflection point, a point where you made a decision maybe to take it to the next level to grow, or, spend some big money, or made a big decision in how you were going to, merchandise. That was a big inflection point for you. Is there something that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think that I would go back to the spring of 1986. And my dad invited the family to his house. And at the time, it was me, my brother, my sister, which were all involved in the business. Of course, my mom, my dad, my wife, and we had two cousins that were involved in the business at that time. So we there was a bunch of us. We had, I think, at that time, maybe 12 stores. He invited us to his house, sat us down in his living room, and basically told us he didn't know how we would survive. The year before, 1985, was the one year in our history where we lost money. All of our stores, the 12 stores, were here in the Oklahoma and the surrounding areas, so we were kind of in the oil patch. The oil boom had busted, and businesses were going out left and right in this part of the country because of that. And so our business was no different. Lost money in 85, spring of 86, when we had the meeting. We were going into the slow time of the year, and our profits were all made in the fourth quarter. And so got to a point where Dad says, I don't see how we're going to make it. And he has written about it in a book he has written called More Than a Hobby, and talks about spending a lot of time away from the phone because those calls weren't any good, and just crying out to God. He'd be walking his park. He talks about being under his desk, saying, God, if you want this company to survive, you're going to have to intervene because I don't know how this is going to work. He'd always been able to figure it out. I mean, he's growing the business. He's trying to add a store. Can I afford to put in another store this next year? And always looking at that budget and trying to figure out how to grow it. But spring of 86, he didn't see how it worked. 1986 wound up being double the most profitable year, almost double the most profitable year that we had ever had. And coming out of that, Dad would say that there's a specific lesson that really stood out to him. And it was a very clear realization: this is not our business. We are only stewards of what God has entrusted to us, because were it not for God, we easily would not be here. So that is a lesson that he learned. It has informed the business. That time also caused us to re-merchandise the store. There were things that we were selling before the oil boom that wasn't, and changed up, and we're having to find who and what we are. It kind of solidified, here's who and what we are. We were doing things like luggage and gourmet foods and ceiling fans, and that's not who we are. So it really helped determine who we were and whose we were, because now again, Dad would have said before that, this is God's business, and it's easy to say that, but that was a time that God made it very clear, and it's a lesson that we don't want to ever forget. It's one of those times that you'd say, I wouldn't want to go back and repeat it, but I also wouldn't trade it because of the lessons learned. So that was definitely a point of inflection in our business.
I'm not sure I'm going to attribute this to the right author, C.S. Lewis or Tim Keller, who talks about the fact that sometimes when we as humans are successful in life, even as Christians, we give ourselves credit. I must be a good business person. And then when we don't have success, well, it's God's fault. He's not helping me. And part of what I'm hearing from your experience in 1986 was part of the lesson is, it's God's business. And sometimes failure is what triggers that realization that I'm just not in control and I'm not as good as I think I am.
Yeah.
I know that's true in my life.
Well, and another lesson that Dad would point out is that he feels like a bit of pride was creeping in. Hey, I can do this. He had worked for a successful retailer. He was going on his own. Business was growing. It was doing well, and he just felt like God said, "Oh, you can do this by yourself. Let's see how well you can do it by yourself." And
Right.
so it was a very real lesson learned that we are dependent upon God. And going back to the first question is our success is because God's blessed us, and He's blessed us with abilities, and we do our best, but we make mistakes. But God still goes before us, and has we know He has blessed our business.
Yeah, and even as an ongoing basis, Kurt and I have experienced that a lot in the last few years of just really feeling this need to um, stay connected, make sure we're not just checking in our prayers of, okay, Lord, let's help make sure we're doing the right thing here, but really going to Him and just being quiet. There's so much value in just trying to listen, or get in the Word and just what do you have for me? Where are you moving? That's been a recent motto of ours, is looking to see where is God moving and where can we serve or what impact can we make, because there's things happening all around. And we just have to be looking for it. And sometimes we're not, when we're caught up in our own ambition, our own goals, our own objectives. We forget to think about what are His objectives, and what is He trying to do. So um, that requires us to humble ourselves and recognize that we are not in control.
Yeah,
Uh,
deny
we
ourselves
have our
and
part to play. That's right.
yeah, and
That's right.
follow Him.
Yeah, and it's an interesting question I get asked, which is, where is that balance between saying, okay, it's up to God, but obviously I can't sit on my couch and eat Cheetos. And there's that balance of your work is a form of worship, and so we're always trying to do the best we can. To your point of striving for excellence, um, but I don't know how you have. Do you have any advice about balancing those two things?
Yeah, I think you do. You have to be busy about whatever you're doing, and do the best you can, but knowing that you're dependent upon Him. An example I have that was very real to me was as we were looking for a place for a museum of the Bible. We didn't know where we were going to be. We were looking in a variety of different places, and I knew that if God wanted it in Timbuktu, He could, make it clear. Here's where to go. But I felt like we had to be in the process of searching and finding where should we go. And as we're about doing that, then He shows up and guides and directs us. But if we just sat back and said, "Okay, where is it?" I think He's sitting there saying, "Well, go out there and be looking." So we had to be about what God's called us to do, and then as we're doing that, He shows up and guides and directs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought it's interesting how many of the family have stayed involved with Hobby Lobby. And I thought there has to be a time, this is maybe in my imagination, when you thought to yourself, well, maybe I want to do something different. Maybe I maybe I want to be an athlete or a college professor or start my own thing. Was there ever a time when you said, I think I'm going to strike out on my own, or thought about that?
There has been, and it was not as much because I had other interests that I wanted to pursue. It more had to do with the challenges within family relations and family dynamics and challenges. And Dad kind of has written about this as well, and in his book, and how that he Felt God was convicting him that he was trying to change me, and I was sensing that, and was feeling this pressure that I'm not going to measure up to Dad. He's very successful. There was more than one time that I just said, this is not for me. I think I need to go do something different, and talked to him about it a couple of times, and he kind of convinced me to say no. He wanted me to stay here, and so I did, and then I can remember eventually realizing that I always felt like I would go to church, volunteer, at the church, teaching a Sunday school class or running a soundboard or something like that, and then I'd go to work and earn a living for my family, and I saw, okay, here I'm providing a living, and there's my ministry. But it became very clear to me at a point that this was my ministry, that God had called me here, had placed me here, and that while I still volunteer at church, my primary ministry is here at Hobby Lobby and what we are able to do through the success that God has blessed us with here.
It's obviously been a big success. And as I read that number, $7.5 billion in sales, I was thinking to myself, I get excited about our, fraction of that, but also feel so much like, man, there's too much to do in my, we have 50, we've had up to 50 employees here. You've had up to 45,000. And I'm thinking, that's 50 seems like a lot to manage. How do you sort of balance the size of the operation and know, here's what I should be working on? How do you make time to be on this silly podcast when you've got a lot to do? I thought you've got to have something mastered there.
Well, it goes back to organization. You have to have good people. There isn't a way to do this without good people. We bring in the new co-managers that we have hired throughout the company almost monthly, maybe 8 to 10 times a year, and there may be 40 to 60 co-managers. And one of the things that Dad is always telling them is that, one, there's something more important than this job, and that is your family. We want you to have time to work at your family. As a matter of fact, he says it's typically easier to be successful at work than it is at home.
Mm,
So it's important for you to have time with your family. And the only way you're going to be able to do that here is by building a good organization. Even at a store level, if a manager's not building a good organization, he's not going to run the level of excellence that we are looking for in a store manager. So it's required of a store manager that they build and have good people so that they are able to go home and spend time with family, go to church, and but the only way we're able to do this at the corporate level is the same way, is building good people. We've got a lot of good people in the organization, and that makes it where I have time to do this. I spend more of my time on Museum of the Bible than I do Hobby Lobby, and so because we've got good people here, I'm able to do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah. Well, and that's a big project in and of itself. I was uh, really excited to talk about that because in some ways that's the reason we're connected here. It's through Dr. Jerry Pattengale, who was my history professor, Kristen's history professor in college.
Shout out.
Yes. And who worked with us, who worked with you on the Museum of the Bible, probably still does. I'm not sure if he still does today. And uh, tell us how did that idea get conceived of, and tell us a little bit of the story of how that had became a real thing.
Yeah, the short of it is I lovingly say God tricked us into it because it was not something we were planning on doing. It wasn't a foreign concept. My brother had opened a Christian bookstore called Mardell, and he had made a comment a time or two throughout the years. It'd be neat to put in a Bible museum. So, not that it was foreign, but it wasn't something that we were planning on doing. It wasn't something on the agenda. Met a group of guys that wanted to put a Bible museum in Dallas, and they asked if we would help them. Well, through a series of events, we started buying some artifacts for their collection, uh, and we had no idea we would be able to collect as much as we did, as rapidly as we did. but our collection started growing. And again, we're buying it not for us, but for them. When a collector in Hagerstown, Maryland sold us his 10,000 piece collection. And when he agreed to sell us his collection, that's when the family said, well, maybe we needed to be sure the dream became a reality. We had the resources to get it started. We had a growing collection, and the guys that had the dream for the museum in Dallas had neither. So, somewhat by default, it became our project. And that's when we opened it up. What if God didn't want it in Dallas? I want him to know we'd go wherever. And looked at the top 10 metros. The other two that stood out to me were New York and Washington, D.C. So we were looking in all three, Dallas, D.C., and New York, when we did a survey. Survey said it'd be best attended in D.C. So it said, let's focus there. And um, God brought the building, and we opened up in November of 17. So not a journey we had anticipated being on. 10 years before we opened, I would have had no idea that Jackie and I would be on that journey, but God directed our paths in that way.
Well, I know you've been doing some really cool things through the Bible Museum. I read about some of the tours of the collection that have been in different parts of the world, including the Vatican, which is really cool. So that's the life goal right there.
Yeah.
So what's next? What's the next big Bible Museum project?
Well, yeah, before we ever knew where we were going to be, that's when we said, let's do some temporary exhibits, because we've got these artifacts in our closet. So actually started some temporary exhibits here in the US, went to 6 cities. That opened the door for us to do the international ones, which the first one was at the Vatican. We went back and we were there twice. That relationship opened the door to do a couple exhibits in Cuba. So we were in Havana and Santiago, Cuba, Argentina and Israel. So we did several of those. When we found the location in DC, we started focusing there. We didn't do the temporary exhibits because the focus was in DC. And I have to laugh when I've asked this question: is what's the next 10 years hold? Because I'm sitting here thinking 10 years before we opened the museum, I had no idea I'd be on this journey. And so I can say, here's what I think the next 10 year holds. And I think God says, that's nice. And you have your plans, but I'll let you know when what you're going to be doing. And so I hold my plans loosely, which I think is what we have to do. But there's 3 things that in my mind is the focus for the museum. One is to try to get as many people into the museum as possible. And we're rookies. We're new in DC, one of the newer museums there. So there's a lot of opportunity to get word out. I've spoken at a men's event in Memphis, and there was maybe 1,000 men there. I asked how many had never heard of Museum of the Museum of the Bible. And over half of them said they had never heard of it. And so
Oh,
I'm sitting here
wow.
thinking, wow, we have a lot of
Wow.
opportunity. So getting millions there, because as a visitor comes, they get inspired to engage with the Bible. That's our purpose. And
Mhm.
so that's one. And then I feel specifically, let's target leaders. How can we get leaders into the museum? Because if we can inspire leaders to live biblical faith and biblical principles in their life, then they're impacting those they're leading. Um, and I think that's why God directed us to DC. There's a lot of leaders in DC, whether it be political
Yes.
leaders or otherwise. And for example, we had a group that was in the museum. They were in for the March for Life, and this was a specific Ivy League student group. And there were last year 400. This year there was 500 Ivy League students. They were in the museum. Vice President Pence addressed them and others. And so when we can inspire leaders of tomorrow, then that that is the museum serving its purpose well. It was a week or two after that, we had a prayer event the day before the National Prayer Breakfast, where there were leaders from all across the country as well as the world, and international visitors that were in for the National Prayer Breakfast. We had over 30 congressmen in praying for our country. And so it's a way of inspiring leaders to say, this book has served our nation well, And if you apply its principles to your life and to your business, to your ministry, to the government decisions you're making, it will serve you well there as well. So, um, focusing on leaders, bringing millions, focus on leaders, and then how can we take the museum's message out? Many million will come to the museum, but many more million will never make it to the museum. So, how do we go have an impact? And there's ways working on curriculum to teach students in class, media efforts. We have a Christmas and the Easter program that we've aired for the last couple of years. And so, are there ways for us to go out to those that might never make it to DC? So that's kind of the three big buckets I see: bringing millions in, impacting leaders, and going out to those that won't come.
It's a good business lesson, right, about focusing on influencers and people that are in that position to spread the word. So as we tailor this to our people that are listening, that's a very good
Yeah.
thing to think about. But I just had to say, that's got to be some closet. You said you were picking artifacts out of your closet. I didn't want to interrupt you, but that's not the kind of closet I have. So I don't.
Well,
Yeah.
Apparently,
and
in the Green household, that's what you're storing in your household closets.
well, it was literally a closet here at the office, where we stored tables for a room we had that we converted, and I used that closet when we first got started. And then when that 10,000 piece collection came in, we outgrew the closet and had to go and create another space here in our warehouses. We have today 13 million square feet of warehouses, and we take a
Wow.
corner of that but some of the collection is still here. A lot of it is there in DC today. So,
Well, we're glad you did. I'm sorry, it just struck me
yeah.
funny. Maybe it's just the female perspective, but
Well, as you were talking about the power and the guidance and the importance of the Bible, it made me think of a recent personal experience I had. I was talking to a gentleman who I knew from business, and he was asking questions about faith. He didn't really
Mhm,
understand
mhm.
faith, and asked, "Well, what can I read? What?" And so I started thinking about books he could read, and what's a good author who might be great for somebody who's doesn't know much about the faith. And I started getting nervous. I'm thinking, well, should I direct him to the Gospel of John? Where should I go? And I'm thinking, and at one point I just sort of woke up and I thought, now wait a second. I'm sort of judging whether or not I think the Word of God's effective at its job here. And I should just tell him, here's a good book you ought to read. It's been a powerful tool in many of our lives for well over 2,000 years. And so I shouldn't judge it too harshly.
Yeah.
And I just sort of laughed at myself over that.
Yeah, I've thought before, and sometimes I hesitate, should I say it? But the more I think about it, the more I say, no, this is legitimate. If you had the option of all the books in the world without the Bible, or the Bible with no other books, pick the Bible.
Yeah.
It is
Mhm.
the book that has the answers for all of life. So, um, and the more I think about it, that is a legitimate um, recommendation: is pick the Bible over everything else because it's God's truth.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it is an excellent distinction.
Part of the reason that Chris and I have shopped at Hobby Lobby through the years is because we connected with the values of the organization, which we first recognized when we saw that Hobby Lobby was closed on Sunday. And it's a little hard to walk through the store and not figure out that there's a faith connection here, a lot of things for sale. And it really helped us to connect with the organization. But there's also some choices that I think, from an outsider's perspective, might have reduced your economic opportunities, like not being open on Sunday. There might be some others. You've defied a trend. I think people would say, why would you do that when you can have another sales day? Um, why do you think that is? Is there do you think those decisions have been supportive of growing? How do you think those affect the economics of the store?
Yeah, and we have the unique situation of the first stores that we opened were not open on Sunday. Then as we went up against competition, felt like we needed to open on Sunday, so we were open on Sunday, and then made the decision to close. So we've kinda gone through, both being open and closed, and, as we were closing our stores, Dad had calculated the amount of business we were doing on Sunday, and it was over $100 million at that time on Sunday, and it was as many years ago, and that was significant for the business, and it was a bit of a scary time. Is this what's this how's this gonna impact our business? We're trying to make a profit, and some stores were not making, and so this is only gonna make it harder. And we were doing it about month by month, closing down a state at a time, and, those 2 years that we were closing them down, business was really kinda soft. It almost kind of was flattened out, and, um, I kinda sense in hindsight, God was kinda testing, "Are you committed to closing on Sundays?" We felt like we stated that we wanted to operate, we wanted to honor God in all we did by operating our stores according to biblical principles. And so, as we started closing them, and sales were soft, but once we got them all closed, the profits really started taking off, and we started doing a whole lot better. And part of that, we obviously give God credit for that. And I look at our industry, and we don't have a lot of other national change in our industry, but when you look at our bottom line, we are heads and shoulders above the competition in our industry. And you look at Chick-fil-A, which in their industry, they have a lot of competition, and they're closed on Sunday. And I have argued and said that it's a bigger commitment on their part than it is ours, because you can go buy your canvas on Monday that you don't buy on Sunday, but nobody eats Sunday lunch on Monday. You're gonna go eat lunch on Sunday. And so that's business that they give up. But they, as well, in their industry, are heads and shoulders above the competition in their profit per unit. As I understand, and this was several years ago when we were talking to their family. We know the family and meet with them from time to time. But so from what I understand, they are heads and shoulders. So part of the reason that I could give you some reasons is I think that we attract a uh, employee because of that. And
Mhm.
we are
Exactly.
only as good as our people, and we can attract some of the best because we're only open 66 hours a week. And I mentioned the co-managers that we bring in. I can't tell you how many times they say that they love working for Hobby Lobby because of the work-life balance. They came from other companies that were 24 hours, or the demands were high on their time. And just this last week with the co-manager in here, a particular gentleman stood up and said, "I have time to spend with my son," and going fishing with his son. And so, and again, we're telling them that is more important. And they realize that. So the quality of people that we get because of our hours then makes us a better company, because we're only as good as our people. And so, um, bottom line, God had a plan and an idea when He created us, and when He says you need some time every week to rest, uh, it it serves families well to do that.
Yeah, well, and for me, not knowing anything about Hobby Lobby, that was one of the first things I noticed. Right, I had no idea, never heard of the Green family, didn't know about the. I would have shopped at Hobby Lobby before probably the Museum of the Bible was out
Oh,
there,
yes.
and but it sent a clear message.
Mhm.
And part of what we try to talk to business owners about is there's a group of consumers that really want to hear that message, and they're motivated by it. So
But I
uh,
think what's even more powerful is that wasn't the answer, right? We think about it in terms of aligning with your customers' values and sending signals to gain loyalty and all of those things. But the impact that had on your workforce, like you said, because everything, it's all about the people. And so that observation, I think, is so powerful. Um, and then that helped you with those to attract and retain this stellar workforce, which is a huge part, right, of all businesses. You got to have the right people in the right seat and aligned with the business's mission and what you're trying to accomplish. So that's such a great distinction.
As we serve our employee here at the corporate office and take care of them, they are the ones on the front line serving our customer. And when we serve them well, then they're serving our customer well. And it makes for success.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And, we spent so much time talking about faith here, and I'm excited to do it. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly a combination of factors. I turned 45 this year, so maybe I'm having a midlife crisis or something, but it's become more and more clear to me this year that the typical things that have driven me, my financial goals, achievements I wanted to get, success in my own mind, ultimately, when I got them, the feeling of accomplishment was pretty fleeting. And that faith, family, these are the things that long term are so much more powerful in my life. I see how you guys have talked about that as part of your mission there at Hobby Lobby, but how in the middle of everything, all that's going on in your life, how do you personally manage to kind of keep Christ first in your life?
Yeah. The question somewhat assumes I do, not that I do. Um, it's a daily
Mhm.
challenge. It's a daily work to, I'm in ideal every moment of every day you're hearing from and you're being guided by God and His Spirit and His Word, and that's a challenge, and strive to do that. Obviously, the disciplines of a Christian life, attending church
Mhm.
regularly, and I years ago made a commitment to God that I would be in His Word every day, reading Scripture, and so I do volunteer at church and teaching class. We rotate three of us, and that's a discipline that forces me to say I've got to have something to share, from
Yeah.
Scripture, and so it serves me well to personally forcing me to say, find something out that you want to share that you're passionate about, and so those disciplines of life are part of what helps me try to do my best to focus my life in hearing God's voice and living it out on a daily basis.
Yeah. And I think living it out is part of one of the, obviously Kristen was asking about that before, you know, and I know it's had a big impact, obviously, on some of the decisions you have made. But what would you say is the biggest impact your faith has had on your business?
Yeah, I think that there's a variety of decisions. I don't know that one stands out, but the decision to close on Sunday, as an example, there's a period of time, kind of in the mid '90s, when the ministry side of the business really started to expand. And it really started with newspaper ads. We started, Dad felt we needed to share what Easter and Christmas was all about. We or sell a lot of Easter bunnies at Easter and Santa Clauses at Christmas time, but we wanted people to know what those holidays were about. So we started doing a newspaper ad and ultimately full page ad in every market where we were advertising. And that's kind of moved to social media today. But that led to us closing our stores on Sunday. That led to us hiring chaplains. We have chaplains here at our corporate office for our employees, to increasing our giving as well, to a point where today we give half of our pre-tax profits to ministry efforts, Museum of the Bible being one of those. And so those are a journey that we have been on really from the mid '90s, that God's kind of taken us on to uh, live out our faith as best we can through the business. And it's been exciting to see uh, all that has gone on, and there's much more that has gone on. But that's an example of some of the things that have transpired to uh, direct us to being more mission minded within the business.
Well, as we come close to the end of our time together, I thought we'd give a couple of opportunities to maybe talk about something that's not Hobby Lobby related. Although we'll start with something that might be faith related. What's the spiritual distinction that you've had recently? Maybe something God's been saying to you that's really impacted your life.
Well, I just kind of go back to Sunday school lesson I was teaching this last Sunday. I was teaching on the woman at the well. Found out that has been said is the longest discussion Jesus had with anybody. Not
Mm,
teaching. Yeah, the Sermon on the Mount was a teaching or
Hmm.
teaching with his disciples,
Hmm.
but a dialogue. This was the longest dialogue, and that was interesting. And I'm also was thinking, we're in the political season and everybody's wanting to get the next scoop. What's the next scoop that I
right.
can? And there are those in the political world that use that. They've got a scoop and they're using it to try to get an audience. And um, come to find out, Jesus is getting ready to give this woman at the well a scoop, not just for a political season, but a scoop that is going to impact the world.
Yeah.
And he is giving it to her. Now, the Samaritan people were kind of an outcast. They were
Right.
a mix between the Assyrians and the Jewish people. And even to this day, as I understand, they speak Arabic, but they have their worship service. They follow the Torah and they speak Hebrew in their services. So they're a mix. They don't fit in anywhere, and they're almost an outcast. And she was the outcast of the outcast.
Of the out. Yes.
And he meets her. He goes out of his way to meet her. And you're sitting here thinking, why? And then he gives her the scoop that he hadn't given anybody. She says, well, when the Messiah comes, he's going to tell us all things. He says, I am he.
Mm,
Wow. Just a chapter before in John, he's talking to Nicodemus, the leader of the Jewish leader. He doesn't tell him, he tells her.
right.
And you have to think why. It's a simple answer, because he loved her. He loves the outcast of the outcast. He loves us all. He came and died for us all. And here was an incredible effort to go and find the outcast of the outcast, because he wants them to know he loves them as well. So an incredible story that God has given to us of his incredible love for all people.
Yeah.
I love that story.
Yeah, it's powerful.
We heard a sermon on it not too long ago, and it was so moving. The more you understand the details, right, and the history, that's why that context is so important for people to understand and to educate yourself. Because, the Word of God is powerful enough, but when you appreciate what was going on in history at that time and what makes some of those things so significant, it just adds so many additional textures and layers of to where we can really appreciate just the overwhelming abundance of his love for us down to the individual level. So when you brought that up, I thought, because that is it's such a powerful example of just what you said. So
And there's so much
I couldn't.
to dig out, and I would encourage people to go watch The Chosen's depiction of that scene. They do a phenomenal job of that scene as well.
Yeah. Well, that leads to my last one. It's 90 seconds on any topic that's interesting you this day. Maybe you got a new hobby. Maybe you want to sing the praises of your favorite sports team. What's got you interested or got your obsession perhaps outside of some of the topics we've talked about?
Yeah, I won't go down the sports road. Go Thunder, go Sooners, but that's a different topic.
Yeah.
Last week, I took a day. I didn't have anything on my calendar, and that just never happens. And I took a day to drive up to Missouri to a grave site where my great great grandparents are buried. I'm kind of over the years gotten interested in genealogy, and my great great grandparents, his name was Calvin Luther Lucas, and I'm sitting there thinking, there's got to be some biblical significance there. His father was Ezra, whose father was Isaac, whose father was Ezra. And I'm sitting there saying, okay, there's a heritage there. And I think of a artifact we have at the museum, Elizabeth de Boon Psalter Book of Hours. It's a manuscript in the 1400s that was highly illuminated, every page, gold leafing and all that, so it would have cost a lot. Elizabeth de Boon was the commissioner of that particular document, why it's called that, and found out in research that Elizabeth de Boon is my wife's 21st great grandmother. 21 greats grandmother, going back to the genealogy though, and it has caused me to think of the heritage that I have, my wife has, and inspiring us to say, we want to leave that for our children, our children's children. We want to inspire our children to pass it on to their children and their children's children, because we have been given a precious heritage, both of us, and inspired to say that's what we want to do with our lives as well.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. If their name is Calvin Luther,
Yeah,
there has to be somebody who knew the fathers of the faith. Absolutely.
and by the
We
way,
really,
through Calvin
yeah.
Luther's line, I go back to the Mayflower. I've done
Wow.
I'm part of the Mayflower Society, so I know at least one, and I can probably
Of
9 on the
course you
Mayflower
are.
that are my grandparents.
Wow. That's amazing. It seems like both sides of my family all made a simultaneous decision to move from Germany to the U.S. During their potato famine.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're kind of late entrants compared to Mayflower folks.
Yeah, but he is German.
So
Yeah,
there's a lot of Luther on my side, a lot of Lutherans, if to be specific, on my side of the family as a result. And I've also enjoyed that too, because there's also a lot of pastors and other people who cared about faith on my side of the family. And I think often I inherited that. I didn't have to learn about it from a third party.
yeah.
It was kind of built into my daily life.
And how blessed we are.
It's a blessing.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't thank you enough for making time to spend with us. And if you want to learn more or get in touch with Steve, hit him up at hobbylobby.com. He also has a couple of great books you can find on Amazon. I discovered them myself. And he mentioned a couple of them on the show. So get in touch with him there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve. That was such a powerful conversation. And I know I'm inspired. So thank you for sharing.
You bet. Great being here. Thank you for having me, and blessings to you both.
Yeah.
All right. Until next time.